So I will be using a Loon Watch article for this video, and I understand what Loon Watch is. Defending Islam, defending Muslims, I get it. But it's important to focus on the data and the facts that they present, so just ignore their agenda. The widely held narrative of Maajid Nawaz is that during his time in the Egyptian prison, he undergone a radical transformation and he abandoned the ideas of Islamism and instead took on those of secularism and democracy. However, when you examine the evidence, it becomes clear the reality is slightly different. For example, upon his release, he declared in a press conference that I have become more convinced of the ideas that I went into prison with. So he's more convinced of the ideas, the Hizb ut-Tahrir ideology, which is basically Islam, it's basically ISIS. He's more convinced of those ideas after he left the prison. Not of secularism or democracy, no, of the ideas he went into prison with. Also, during 2006, he could be heard screaming, "The crimes of the Israel people. Who is it? The Israelis or the Palestinians who break the bones of children? Who breaks the bones of children? Who destroys houses upon the heads of men, women and children?" And ultimately calling for the destruction of Israel and to replace Israel with the Islamic State. Yeah, I'll say it again, replace Israel with the Islamic State. And during this rant, also talking about the myth of Muslims and Jews and Christians all living happily together in the Islamic State. Forgets to mention the jizya and the second class status of those Christians and Jews, just leave that out. But yeah, this is basically what his ideology was just 11 years ago. Effectively, he was pushing ISIS. He was ISIS. Hizb ut-Tahrir is ISIS. It's all ISIS. It's all Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, Taliban. Don't confuse it. It's all the same. And so, yeah, he's calling for the destruction of Israel just 11 years ago. But remember, he's the good guy and he had an awakening in the jail. But he came out and called for the Islamic State. It's almost as if it's all bullshit. For the first few years of Quilliam, the funding primarily came from the UK government. In total, they received over £1.2 million. And with that money, they did absolutely nothing. They achieved nothing. They did not reform Muslims. They did not reform Islam. Yeah, just utterly pointless. And luckily, the government are naive, but they're not stupid. So eventually they cut the funding when they realised that the Muslim community did not listen to Quilliam. They hated Quilliam, they hated Maajid Nawaz, and giving more money to Quilliam was not going to help counter extremism. No, it was a dead end. 2011 marks the point at which the government funding dries up. But even though that's the case, they still beg for an extra £150,000 as an emergency loan or whatever. Sadly, the government can only offer them £40,000, and Maajid claims that will only be enough to cover his salary and rent for 3 months, £40,000. But thankfully for Quilliam, an important landmark for them is the registering of Quilliam US as a charity in that year, and that saves them. Because effectively, and there is a lot of detail in this article, I won't go into all of it, but to summarise, that is a way for donors to give money to Quilliam via this charity in the US called Quilliam US. But Quilliam US at that point in time does not exist. It's just on paper. Now, I think it's changed, but then it was merely a way to funnel money to the main Quilliam, and they make it clear in the article. And so these groups who are giving the money, they support Israel. They are right-wing. And when I say right-wing, I think they mean neoconservatives, neocons, and there's a massive Jewish influence in neoconservatism. And so this is the point at which Maajid begins to shill for the Jews. Moving forward to 2014, this is the year that Maajid receives $20,000 from Sam Harris. And I'll be honest, the whole Sam Harris, Maajid Nawaz situation, I was quite confused at that a while ago. I just couldn't understand what was going on. Was Sam Harris just stupid? But no, he isn't stupid. The point is, if you ask the right questions, you shall get the answers. And fundamentally, Sam Harris is just Sam Harris. And so he has a keen interest in the state of Israel. He supports Israel. And Maajid Nawaz, at this point, also supports Israel. However, funny enough, old Sammy boy isn't so keen on everyone to have their identity, no. Because all identity politics is bad, apart from Israel, but surely white identity politics is the most detestable of all. Hashtag Charlottesville. That's odd, isn't it? It's almost as if Sam Harris has some sort of bias. Nah, couldn't be, right? Okay, so to summarise, the main takeaway from this video, and this is aimed at the Maajid lovers, the bean flickers. No Muslim is going to take seriously a man who 10 years ago was calling for the destruction of Israel and the establishment of an Islamic State in Israel, but then 10 years later is being funded by groups who support Israel. And he himself is spreading the propaganda and supporting Israel. No Muslim, and I mean the real Muslims, the imams, that sort of level, no Muslim at that level is going to take Maajid Nawaz seriously. And if you can't understand that, then you're deluded. You are living in some sort of, you're basically a religious person. You believe in Maajid Nawaz. You have no facts to back it up. His only purpose is to help Muslims and to reform Islam. But once they know this, and I think many of them do know this, and this is the main reason why they hate him, then they will not listen to him. And they will go further than that, and they will specifically despise him and never, ever, ever listen to him. And so no. And also something else, which I think white people need to adopt, is Muslims have this fake dar. It's like a gaydar, but for fake people. And Muslims can sniff out Maajid. They can smell him a mile off. They know how fake he is. He reeks of fakeness. But the white man, and especially the white woman, they can't smell it. We're too trusting as a people. But we have to change. We have to realise that Maajid is fake. The Muslims can see it. And we need to ignore him. We need to make him irrelevant. Stop supporting Maajid Nawaz. So, anyway, please let me know what you think about this. And if you get time, do try to read the article. There is so much detail and just lots of great information. And yeah, like, dislike, subscribe, unsubscribe. Please comment. Ilu Sassoon. Peace out.